everything to make sure that we have things covered in the right way. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Tahil Sharma. My pronouns are he and they, and I am the program director at the Interfaith Center at Miami University. It's a pleasure to be with you all today and for this really great subject and for our last event of the calendar year. It's really exciting to have all of you here join us for this really interesting conversation that all started with just sharing space with our colleague who's our main facilitator today, Indi Rishi Singh. We were, getting to really think about the ways that through their experience, through the work that they do in addressing natural disasters and being able to center spiritual frameworks and ways of being able to uh, really work with the resources that we have through a concept called Doughnut Economics, something that I've only heard in terminology, but I'm looking forward to learning about more today. It was really exciting to really see Indiji's fascination, interest, and dedication to putting this into practice. And so I'm really happy to be able to have this opportunity to facilitate this event with Indiji. And honestly, what more can I say except to take it away? Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think for me it's important for us, no matter what we're doing, can we remember to do things, to start things, no matter how challenging or not challenging they are, can we start with good vibrations? So let me just invite everybody to take some deep breaths, and I'm gonna play a little bit of flute for us all. Ah, that was one breath, you guys. What do you think about that? Not bad, right? Sometimes I can get into a real flow. Um, and I hope some of those vibrations help you feel a little bit more calm. I hope it's important for us to remember to kind of bring this deep breath and this deep practice of breathing into whatever we do, or when we're looking at data or information that's challenging our sense of being, our sense of safety or security, our sense of goodwill to other people. Can we remember to come back to our breath? Can we come back to remember the harmony? We can even hum a harmony, right? We can hum a prayer or hum a song that we like, or we could just make up a hum, a hum. How do you say a hum? You can make up a hum. And sometimes when you're doing work, like let's say you are at the front line of a disaster or you're the front line of a crisis, sometimes it also does to help to actually sing or hymn while in that service and that sacred duty and that sacred responsibility. And so this conversation is called sacred resilience, right? And that's an interesting terminology, right? It's interesting as we, there's a lot of in preparation for this and the other things I've been doing. I dove down a bunch of different rabbit holes, and I got more and more nervous about our situation because there's tons of federal money that's going away from disasters, and that's not to say that the FEMA money and most of the disaster money that was it already going to the communities that needed the most? Not really already, right? And now a lot of those things are being cut or they're frozen as well. So, yeah, because everything's centralized. So I just wanted to bring up that awareness that like we are not as resilient as we could be right now. But then the invitation is, can we be sacred? I'm gonna really quickly give you guys kind of a background of who I am, because some of you may know me, some of you might not. And sometimes it's good just to get a frame of who and why am I coming at it from this direction? Why am I, out of all the things I've done in my life, now with all this white hair and my beard, all right, why am I doing this now, with all this white hair? Okay, like I could be doing many other things. Why am I so focused on this? So I'll give you a little bit of that explanation. Before I get there, I just want to share something. in 2018, I was invited to give at a middle school in Los Angeles. I was invited to give a resilience assembly. I actually had to do for three different classes. Okay, so 400 kids and then 400 kids and then 400 kids. So I was like back to back to back assemblies, right? On mental health, getting them all to laugh, getting them all to understand the science of laughter and using laughter for resilience and understanding not to laugh at each other, but to laugh with each other. All this cool stuff about resilience. So I get to school. I mean, it took me months to get this, interviews and conversation. And I get to the school and, I'm ready. I'm like, you have to get like mentally prepared to do that. 400 students along with their teachers, of course, which is also hard because they're all like so stiff and everything. So I had to get the teachers into it too. So I'm preparing myself. I'm trying to get into the mindset and the physical body set. And the principal comes up to me, like hadn't said anything for months, comes up to me right before I'm about to go up. And she says, "Can you please not be spiritual?" She said, "Can you please not be spiritual?" And I was like, that like threw me off. Like I was like just blown away. Like I lost. I mean, I didn't lose my cool to her, but like internally, I was broken. I was like, wow, like how do I not be spiritual? One, like I don't even understand that. Like that doesn't even conceptually make sense to me not to be spiritual, not to see the interconnectedness of things, not to feel my connection to the students, my connection to the teachers, my connection to the parents who are not even physically there. Like I feel all of that. I'm connected to, I'm aware of it. And so how do I not be spiritual? And since then I've just been just trying to wrangle my mind. Like what is up with this separation between spiritual duty and spiritual responsibility and spiritual activism and all the other types of activism, whether it's climate activism or it's economic activism or gender activism or whatever, health activism. There's like all these different activisms, but they very rarely interact with spiritual activism. They're kind of like sometimes separate. Sometimes they do intermingle, but then it's political or it's more like this is our territory and this is your stay in your territory. Um, yeah, I mean, even indigenous, right? Indigenous activism, like where is the spiritual activism integrated into that? The interfaith and interspiritual activism in that. So that story kind of brings me to this place of sacred resilience. It's been really tough over the past few years to try to create an argument for a lot of these community-based organizations or nonprofits or funding agencies to take it serious, to invest in resilience, in disaster resilience and disaster mitigation in communities. I'm going to go deeper into that in a moment, but I feel, what if we're going about this the wrong way? What if we should be leaning into the communities that already have a culture of taking care of each other, a culture of spiritual connection and spiritual responsibility to the community and to the earth? What if we first identify those communities and we honor them and we invite them into more of a space of collaboration for disaster mitigation? That's a different conversation. Okay, disaster mitigation, disaster recovery. We're going to get into that in a moment. Before that, I do all this stuff. Let me just share this. Why? Why am I so important for this conversation? Because I'm certified. I got certified, guys. I got certified by the Contra Costa County, right? Emergency department, okay, management department. There's all around the country, there's different maneuvering that's happening to be more disaster resilient and prepared. The county that I live in is in the 99.52 percentile of disasters. So like, even though we're in the Bay Area, we are like one of the worst. Okay, we have from refineries to the earthquake to fires to flooding. We have all of it, right? Economic, health. We got all the different disasters, even though we're in the Bay Area. So, and that's let alone there's so many other counties all across America that are at the precipice, and even the ones that are in good shape are at the precipice too of poly disasters or poly crises, which I'm going to get into in a second too. So in me saying I'm certified, there's me right there. You can see me right there. Do you see me? I'm sitting there right in the front, right there, right there. Boom, right there. That's me right there. So in the sense of telling you that in this certification, as I've been going to all these meetings and meeting with the sheriff's office and meeting with the department that manages the emergency for the county, I laugh because that's the only way I can cope with it. The communication to us has been, we need you guys. We need the community-based organizations to do the work. And we're like, and I'm like, remember being in the audience, I'm like, well, aren't you guys getting paid? And they're like, no, we need you to do the work in the community. We need you to go out and actually connect the communities and do the disaster mitigation and preparedness. And I'm like, wait, hold on. You guys have this amazing facility. but like we have to go and do that work and we don't have any money for it. So that's really interesting to me that the organizations that we are paying taxpayer dollars for are not, they're ready and prepared for the disaster, right? They're not really gearing up to support the community to be resilient in the face of a disaster or to mitigate the disaster altogether, right? Because like when you talk about like a disaster like flooding, right, you can mitigate that disaster if you build properly or if you do the ecological stewardship properly, right? However, that's mitigation, that's investing in mitigation. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so who am I? I am a student of health, of well-being. It's been kind of my journey of trying to understand it within myself. I went to medical school, found myself not being healthy myself in medical school. And when I got out of that situation, not by choice. It was kind of a crash and burn situation. I really went on a journey to understand my own well-being. What does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be a strong and resilient human being? That so much so that I could show up for others in a better way. And isn't that crazy to think that how many doctors are out there that don't actually have to verify that they're healthy mentally and physically and spiritually themselves? How many nurses do not have to verify, therapists do not have to verify their own mental health, their own mental well-being and resilience. And then they're out there healing other people. And just imagine that, right? Now, or they're writing books about healing people, but still, I wonder how they are, right? So here I am, just really exploring the different perspectives. And in my exploration of my own well-being, I found something really unique and interesting. I've leaned into the fact that I'm highly neurodivergent. And a part of being very neurodivergent is I love seeing problems. Not because I get stuck in the problem, but when I see a problem, my mind starts to, I can't explain it. Like it helps formulate these pathways that allows me to see a possibility of a solution, a possibility of inviting and being curious to reach out to somebody who might have a perspective towards a solution, or maybe collaborating with different people and getting two people to collaborate with each other. And I have no attachment of who owns what. So I'm kind of like, I'm never coming from a place of like, I need to own the solution. It's more like, let's do it together. And this Charadigala spirit, this spiritual practice that comes from my community, this in the Sikhi tradition, which is having relentless optimism, it's very infectious in some ways. Oh, now the sun's kind of away, so you guys can see me now properly. It's given me this really great kind of relationship with being able to it's kind of funny, right? Like we think about like Nikola Tesla and Tagore and Leonardo da Vinci, and we're like, oh my God, these like inventors were so awesome. But like as a neurodivergent inventor myself, like there's no space for us to thrive. Like, in fact, one of my favorite things to do is to find people who are like me and to collaborate with each other and create spaces of well-being for other innovators that are neurodivergent, because we really don't have a place to actuate our ideas, our solutions, our creative conspirations, right? Especially for problems that are really important. So that being said, here's more information. There's a whole CV. You can see all the blah, blah, blah things I've done and all the certifications and this certification and the curriculum. I've done curriculums and workshops, and I've done helped organize festivals and conferences and done civic engagement things and got a podcast over here and organizing Doughnut Disaster Festival. And then there's a whole LinkedIn over here you guys can look at. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So there's all this stuff that you can see about me. That's not what I want to share on this. What I really want to share on this is this exploration of what it means to be a saint today. Like, what does it mean to be a saint today? Is a saint somebody who just has an influencer following of 500,000 people and goes and speaks at a place and people have to line up and pay a lot of money to have a seat with that saint? Or is the saint somebody who's actually identifying where the disasters are? Where is the most suffering happening? Where can the most suffering happen? And how can I or we show up in service to humanity, in service to ecology, in service to the future, to the present and the future and the past? To me, like, where is that space for saints to come together and for the innovators who want to be saints and the neurodivergent people to come together and the autistic people to have an opportunity to shine, because maybe they are asset framing rather than deficit framing. Maybe neurodivergent folks and autistic folks might actually have solutions and permutations of solutions that a normal person who's a part of the system and the institutions can never have. a person who's normally a part of nonprofit industrial complex or the climate industrial complex or the healthcare industrial complex, they'll never have that perspective because they're not able to see things differently, right? So I'm just inviting this conversation for all of us to how can we explore this? Okay, so now this conversation goes into something that some of you might have heard this already before, but here's an invitation. Drop it in the chat if you can. What is a polycrisis? What is polycrisis? I'm gonna write it out for you guys. Does anybody know what polycrisis is? Drop it in the chat. What is it? What's your definition of a polycrisis? I'm gonna share a picture with you guys. Here is an interesting chart of the global risks and the interconnected, not spiritual interconnectedness. This might be this is also, spirituality, I guess, includes everything in some ways. So this is the interconnected map of the problems that are happening all around us, in our families, in our communities. They might be far away, but they're still impacting us, whether it's by the financial system or the political system or just yeah, there's all these like nuanced aspects, and there's nuanced aspects of how high the risks are, how low the influence is or high the influence is. What are they? Environmental, geopolitical, social, technological, environmental. And you could see they're kind of like, you could see that they're all interconnected with each other. They're all touching each other in some way. If not 1 degree, 2 degrees away, there's an interconnection. Even now, more so than ever, there's more and more that's showing us that the environment, our climate and environmental disasters a lot of them are being created by human issues rather than the natural hazards actually on their own being a problem, because natural hazards have been happening forever, right? However, humans also have evolved. I mean, indigenous cultures and communities have evolved to mitigate disasters around those natural disasters, or they've used ecology to actually formulate ways to mitigate the harm from those. But we've eliminated like some of those ecological barriers or ecological solutions, and then people are getting impacted from them, especially, for example, when you talk about a flooding area, you have to maintain a certain type of ecology on the waterfront. If you eliminate that ecology when the sea level rises, or there's a tsunami, or there's whatever, a lot of rain, boom, there's no trees there. Or there's no ecology there to actually soak up that water, right? That's just an example. We're causing a lot of it. The military industrial complex is creating a lot of it too, right? I mean, from Hawaii to California to so many different places, there's so much happening in those contexts. And a lot of it is political too, like our political engagement is causing, or a lack of political engagement is causing it. But that's a whole different conversation. We'll leave that for another time. I'm curious what you guys have said. Oh, okay, I guess I'm just the only one talking about the poly crisis over here. We can talk about the poly crisis ever, but we don't want to just get stuck in a poly crisis. That's the thing. The thing is, in any sort of spiritual practice, you can't evolve in a spiritual practice by just talking about the problems. It's like, yes, you actually have to identify the problem within yourself. When you talk about spirituality, or you talk about connection to spirit, or you're connected to sacredness, you have to notice where things are not sacred. And this right here is showing you that something is not sacred. There's something out of balance here, right? We're out of balance. And so how do we create balance? So the question is, how do we understand disasters? And how do we approach disasters, right? So that polycrisis lets us know there's disasters happening. There's economic disasters, there's healthcare disasters, am I forgetting anything? Drop it in the chat. What are different disasters that are happening? Are there disasters that are individual, that happen to our families and our communities, to our loved ones, right? There's like individual disasters, but then there's community disasters, right? There's maybe we have really old pipes in our town that keep flooding, or that are going to burst or break, or maybe there's the waste management system can fail, or maybe there's electrical outages regularly that can like become a really big problem, or it can turn into a fire, or maybe there's flooding, or maybe there's a lot excessive rain, or there's drought, food insecurity. I mean, you can see like we can keep adding all the layers of disasters that are kind of acute and long term. So I think that's really important to understand the difference, that there is acute disasters. I didn't say acute disasters. There's acute, like something that happens like in a moment, like an earthquake, right? Can happen in a moment. It's like, oh shoot, that's an acute disaster, right? But there's also long-term disasters that take a long time. For example, we're in a loneliness disaster, right? In America, we're literally in a loneliness disaster. In fact, I just learned recently that San Mateo County sort of got like the county supervisors declared a state of emergency about loneliness for the county of San Mateo. So we're in a that's a but loneliness doesn't happen overnight. It literally takes years, if not decades, to build up, right? There's economic aspects to that, right? There's social aspects to that. There's healthcare, and like where healthcare is lacking aspects of that, right? Senior care aspects of a child care aspects, so like long-term stuff that's happening there, right? So there's long-term disasters, there's short-term disasters, and there's everything in between. Okay, this chart right here that I got over my shoulder, this is a really interesting chart to contemplate for a moment. When we think about, when most people think about disasters, I mean, even with this, a part of this is from like our movies and our TV shows and our books. I mean, especially TVs and Hollywood has done a really terrible job. I mean, a great terrible job. Is that the right language? It's done a great job of creating artificial aspects of disasters. Like it's actually completely false that like I don't know how many disaster movies you guys seen where like there's a disaster happening and everybody's running and like and everybody's going crazy. That's not what happens. Like literally, like there's like research about this and evidence and proof that people actually come together when there's a disaster. They actually like that we are actually like our genetics is ingrained in support each other. We're highly altruistic, especially during a disaster. We become more altruistic because we have to rely on each other. For example, look at Puerto Rico. I'm gonna share some an article later with you all so you guys can dive into that later. But what Puerto Rico did when it wasn't getting taken care of after the hurricane was people literally came together. I don't know, what's that book where those kids end up stuck on an island? Do you guys know? Drop it in the chat. What's that book where like I remember reading this when I was in middle school, but a bunch of kids get stuck on a island and they like go crazy and go anarchist. So that actually happened a few years ago. A bunch of kids, like I don't know if it was like a airplane or some boat, they got like stranded, just exactly the same situation. They got stuck on an island and totally the opposite thing happened. Instead of them going crazy and being anarchists and crazy, they actually ended up taking care of each other, created a whole system of governance, took the kids who were more vulnerable, were taking care of the kids who were more strong. I mean, like they literally came together, a bunch of kids, right? Now, so we are ingrained to take care of each other. However, in most disaster depictions, the depiction is that we should be scared and nobody knows what to do. Like that's what's kind of projected at us. It's not true, but that's what's projected at us. It makes you think like what is going on there? Is there something deeper into that? Like why is that? Also, what's interesting is most of what we think about as disaster, the whole disaster happening and then the response, right? The 72 hours, like around an acute disaster is what most of us think about when we think about disaster. But if you look down here, there's recovery. And sure, this is like when, the money starts going out of the GoFundMe's and everything. That starts running out, right? And then, that dwindles away and everything kind of fades. But this thing, the mitigation, this is super important. Not much goes into this. I mean, I will tell you literally from my own perspective, it's been really hard to get support for this. Even when you're coming up with solutions that are amazing, that are solving you saw that poly crisis. Even if you come up with solutions that are solving multiple of those crises, from healthcare to food to healthcare, I mean, healthcare to food to environmental you can be doing that mitigate. Nobody invests in that. Like literally, they're like, what's the return on that? The return is that when there's a disaster, you're not harmed and you don't end up spending way more money. But mitigation does not get attention and it doesn't get love and it doesn't get appreciation. It doesn't get value. The community doesn't come and value it. However, what if it did? What if we created sacred resilience that actually honored the mitigation? And the mitigation process itself was a sacred union of different communities, interfaith, intercultural, interclub, different clubs like the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, the women's club, there's all these different clubs, the Kiwis club, I don't know, I'm gonna go on and on. There's tons of clubs. What if they also were a part of this mitigation work? And they're supposed to be, right? But like my intention with my conversation with the mitigation is not just about mitigating like band-aids. I'm talking about like actually systemic mitigations, right? System stuff, right? That actually makes the system better and stronger and more resilient. And this is also coming from my spiritual tradition, which does this work. For example, we have community kitchens in India and throughout the world. And the way that our community kitchen work is that there's the system that's been designed to create food, abundant food for everybody that's healthy and nutritious, that whenever there's a disaster, we're giving food out to everyone. Literally everywhere in the world. When there's a disaster, even when the pandemic happened, like the church that my mom goes to was giving out food to essential workers, whether they were Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, or didn't even have a spirituality. Anybody could come drive up to the temple and get food for their family and themselves, even though everything was shut down. That was still happening. That is what happens when you create a system of mitigation, because then it ends up supporting others when there's a disaster. That's the benefit of leaning in to the mitigation rather than being in this response spot right here most of the time, which is also fight or flight space. So you're not going to get really innovative over here. You're going to really just be dealing with the trauma right here. This is like a lot of trauma situation, which is really important too in a lot of ways, right? This is super important, super critical, but it also creates a lot of burnout. It creates a lot of issues. I have a lot of friends and myself. There's been a lot of us that have worked at the front lines of this. There's a lot of burnout and there's not a lot of support. So this mitigation stuff, it would actually also support this trauma work as well, because it would create the infrastructure to support the frontline responders. Okay, but before I go into that, I'm gonna drop some more information. This is, in 2016, this is what the government, FEMA, came up, pre-disaster recovery planning guide, right? When I went through this whole thing, you guys can go through it on your own too. There was the very little innovation in this. Like there was very little innovation around food systems, energy systems, cultural systems, spiritual systems. Like nothing in this was about that, right? Very little in mitigation. They have a chapter on mitigation, doesn't have anything in it, right? But then you go into here and you go, the case for pre-disaster mitigation, companies and vulnerable communities need action now. Turns out that there's a lot of money to be saved if we invest in in mitigation. There's a lot. There's a lot of money. I mean, here's all this research by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that shows that when we invest in resilience, when we invest in the mitigation of disasters, it actually saves, I think, what is the number is one every $1 not invested in disaster today can cost communities up to $33. So $1 not invested, $33. You guys know your math. I don't even know what your guys' math is, but like I don't know how, like I'm not a I mean, I could be a numbers person, but I don't like to get caught up in numbers. But like, there's plenty of numbers that prove that we should be investing right now as much as possible, our money, our time, our energy to be resilient, right? Like, there's no time to waste at this point. We already know what's coming from the top, from a centralized place. So how can we act? How can we act with some level of urgency? And how can the urgency be sacred? That's my invitation to all of you. How can we make sure the urgency is sacred? Okay, so does anybody have any questions on any of this? Oh, Lord of the Flies. Oh, thank you. Yes, that was the book. Thank you. This is all super nerdy stuff. I'm gonna leave a link in the chat for you guys. Maybe I'll leave this one in the chat so you guys, any of the nerds out there, or if you have friends that are nerds, you guys can definitely dive into this a little bit. I think it's really important that we start to think about this. Every community is different. I think that's also the key, that a one size fits all is not going to work at this point. Like it's really critical that we address disasters in a way that is bioregional for what the needs of that community is. What is the culture of that community? For example, some of y'all are in Ohio. I'm in California. Ohio and California are very different needs from the community, very different challenges and concerns, very different culture, and very different combination of cultures and how they're interacting with each other, right? So it's really important for us to kind of tune into those different ways. I look forward to coming out to Ohio in the next year and actually tuning in and listening and building bridges between communities to do this. That's one of the intentions of us gathering here, is to start to actually teach how do we build bridges around disaster mitigation. That's kind of, we have to unlearn bad habits, right? Of creating separation and differences that don't lead to us being more resilient, right? We have to unlearn those things, and then we have to relearn that we actually need each other. Whether you're talking about Turtle Island, we're all on Turtle Island. We're all in America, so we need each other in America. But even in our communities, our like Oxford, Ohio community, or a Contra Costa community, whatever it is, or you're on the big island of Hawaii. All these different bioregions are everybody needs everybody in that space. Doesn't matter what their political views are. It doesn't matter what their economic ideas or views are. Everybody needs each other, especially when there's a disaster. So that brings up a good point. What have you guys seen when there's a disaster? I'm gonna share this link. What have you guys seen around the world? Where where have you seen people come together beyond the government supporting them? Because I mean, that's something to think. Like when Hurricane Katrina happened, we saw how, first of all, the levee that broke, there was years and years of people telling engineers and people creating the alarm that that levee was not going to hold up. And then lo and behold, it broke. And so that was a man-made disaster because the levee was not engineered well, it wasn't maintained, and it wasn't evolved. So a lot of people lost their life, a lot of people lost their livelihoods and their communities because the centralized nature of that situation, right? The centralized bureaucracy, the centralized stagnation of actually doing something because it's going to take care of people in the future versus reacting to something, right? Which we keep doing this reacting thing too, right? The healthcare reaction or environmental reaction, economic reaction, food crisis reaction. We keep reacting. It's like that, once again, it's that disaster mitigation thing. It's like, if we keep reacting to things, we're never going to solve it. We're actually going to keep getting further and further behind. So around the world, communities that have come together, right? They have been practicing something really unique. There's something called the shock doctrine. Some of you might have read it or not, but I think it's really interesting to think about this concept of disaster capitalism, right? We have to actually start to acknowledge and be, I think this is why this conversation of sacred resilience is so alive for me, is we need to understand that there is a spiritual crisis. Like when you have this much leadership in every single sector, from the education sector to the technology sector, to the farming sector, to the healthcare sector, to the political, like every sector, you can go to any sector, the leadership is not stepping up with courage, with compassion, it's like things have to change ASAP and they're not changing fast enough for the growing amount of suffering that's happening across the board. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor anymore. Everybody is suffering from this thing. And why, if you keep looking at the history of all of this, if you kind of go down the history from like 30 years ago, you'll see that whenever there's been a disaster, there's been organizations that have made a lot of money. So drop in the chat. When have you seen, or what companies or what organizations or what industries have made money from disasters over the years? Drop in the chat. Who has made money over the last 20 something years, 30 years? When there's a disaster, they've made money. Who? Can you think of anyone? Organizations, individuals, billionaires, millionaires. Red Cross makes a lot of money when there's a disaster. They have a lot. It's a lot of money, definitely. Habitat for Humanity, definitely. Oh my God, Red Cross. Yeah, I was kind of thrown off when I went to India to a few orphanages for Red Cross, and I found them selling kids. Like the Red Cross orphanage was selling kids from India to parents in Europe. It was like the weirdest thing. Like, why are they selling? Like I thought they're getting funding, Like it was weird they were selling children. Um, what other organizations? Like what about during the pandemic? Like, did companies make money? Like, did the social media companies make way more money? Did the pharmaceutical companies make more money? Did Who else? I mean, do you guys notice how, like, over and over and over again, like there's certain billionaires get more billions of dollars when there's a disaster? So like in some ways, it's kind of it's both terrifying, and at the same time, this is a part of the spiritual practice, is we can't be afraid of the shadows, right? Whether you are in whether a part of your tradition or your spiritual traditions looks at the demons, right, in the world, or in the metaphysical or the real world, or we just acknowledge that sometimes there's sociopathic narcissism that can run rampant, right? If you want to go into the mental conditions of that, or if you want to go into the spiritual conditions, the metaphysical, it doesn't matter. There is a rampant disease happening, and that spiritual disease is causing a lot of harm to all of us. People keep making money, but that money is not trickling down to anybody. It's not trickling down to any systemic change or systemic evolution. Even Habitat for Humanity, Tahil, you brought up, I love it, but how can that also be systemic? Like, how does that lead to more system thing rather than like continuously the nonprofit industrial complex where you need the funding and you keep needing the funding and you keep needing the funding? It's like, how does that turn into something where it doesn't need funding anymore? It is actually being self-funded or locally funded, right? And connecting with other issues and challenges, right? Including healthcare and food and energy and all these other things that really matter to all of us. And culture. I think cultural capital and cultural currency is important too. And how do we develop and cultivate that? Mind you, when you study around the world where people like in Puerto Rico have come together and they've resisted disaster capitalism and they did something, it's called disaster collectivism. Right? When they've done that, it's oftentimes fueled by a shared culture, not necessarily one culture, but a shared culture, a culture that actually believes in collectivism, that believes we need to take care of everybody. Like everybody needs to be taken care of. Not like, oh, that person, we don't like them. Or like, oh, that person's always complaining. I don't want to take care of that person. Like not that thing. Or like, oh, that the person doesn't agree with me. I'm not going to take care of them. That's not the collectivism, the culture of collectivism. The culture of collectivism that actually does something is when everybody is taken care of, everyone's lifted, including the animals and the ecology. Oh, nice to see you. Wait, I saw Diana pop in there. Nice, hi. Did you want to say anything about Puerto Rico? No? All right. The Puerto Rican there. I always want to give a Puerto Rican a chance, all right? I want to get cut by a Puerto Rican. So there's more research. There's a lot of like information and data about disaster capitalism. But once again, really what it is, it's about us and acknowledging the realistic situation. Okay. Like this is real, guys. Like we have to face this demon. We have to face this spiritual disease. There's sociopathic narcissism, this sociopathic corporations, a sociopathic, infiltration of even our most righteous spaces, right? Our nonprofit spaces, our interfaith spaces might have really good intentions, but where's the systemic change that's happening in those spaces? That's really more important. Like where is it going beyond the influencer or beyond, oh, like that's that important person or like, oh yeah, they're really important, but like where's the systemic change happening? How can the capital and the resources and the network lead to disaster collectivism and mitigation of disaster harm? That's the invitation of this conversation. Really, it is about how do we build a people's response, right? Versus a capitalistic response, which we already know. We're seeing this over and over again. And by the way, I want to iterate, I'm not against capitalism. I think the idea of great ideas succeeding is awesome. That's awesome. Let the best idea thrive. But that's not what's happening right now. As somebody who always comes up with great ideas, best idea does not get space to thrive. Like literally, have you been to a public comment meeting of a city hall or a county? You can bring up a great idea and nobody has to even respond to you, right? I think we are not acknowledging that the best ideas are not even having a space. So we're not even in a capitalistic community our country at this point. Really, even most billionaires are taking subsidies, actually. In fact, when there is a disaster response and all this money all this funding happens, it goes to most of the billion-dollar companies. Even when I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a food crisis that happened, right? I went and did some research about who was getting paid for all the food that goes to all the seniors in our community, like all the guaranteed subsidies that pays for food that goes out to seniors is going to a transnational company that's creating ultra processed food and bringing food in from all over the world that's using pesticides and chemicals. And so we are literally, our taxpayer dollars are paying for transnational, international companies, billion-dollar companies, to poison our elders. That's real. So that's not capitalism. That's socialism for the rich or socialism for the international companies that are kind of sociopathic, right? They're not spiritually grounded or rooted. So invitation for us all to start to lean in. How can we start to practice disaster collectivism in such a way that we are actually tuning into all this money that exists for food, There's money that exists for healthcare. There's money that exists for climate action. There's money that exists or energy or transportation. There's money because the billionaires keep going getting it. But how do we come together collectively to not just get that money, but also reimagine our local money, reimagine potentially our 401ks, funding disaster collectivism, or maybe reimagine, because guess what? If your 401k or your pension fund is literally making the community healthier, guess what? You're going to benefit from it too, automatically, because you're going to have caregivers in the community that are taken care of. They're going to be able to take care of you better. You're going to have better food and access to food because people are growing the food locally near you. You're going to have more kids who are going to have more space to hang out with you if you're an elder, and you have more intergenerational connection and interspiritual connection because there's going to be more space because everybody's being taken care of. And a part of disaster collectivism is bringing culture together, like recreating culture, where we're sharing culture and sharing spiritualities and sharing our backgrounds and mythologies, right? I'm going to share this link with you guys as well. It's another reminder for us to think about how can we approach our challenges with a growth mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, right? Because what I've noticed over and over again when I talk to folks about organizing around disaster mitigation, I'm noticing the response, like there's an automatic response of this is just always how it's been. We can't do anything. Or like, there's not enough money. There's no money. And I'm like, not true. Even when I went to that training, I got paid to go to that training. So you can get paid to go and get emergency training. Like, so there's money. Like, our nonprofit got paid to do disaster training. Okay. You guys can do that too. Also, like, what if we actually approach this process from a place of entrepreneurship? What if there is actually money? What if we think about actually creating a local economy around disaster collectivism? Like, why does it always have to be, like, once again, I said, why do we always have to be on the reaction, right? On the response, the disaster response? We can also be in the disaster mitigation, and that can be an industry itself. And that industry can produce potentially eco toilets or new healthcare systems that integrate food as medicine and integrate ecological medicine, and ecological stewardship can be included in that healthcare, which can also lead to more disaster mitigation because you're planting trees, or you're like doing flood management by planting the right kind of mangroves. I think mangroves, right, are the ones that help mitigate floods, right? So there's all these different things that we can do that would actually be a part of the healthcare system. I'm just throwing an idea that I'm coming up with because of what I'm learning. Last but not least, I want to share in this context is this concept of imagining that what we're doing with when we're thinking about disaster mitigation, going back to this kind of this chart, when we're in this dark purple area, right, with the mitigation and the prevention, that we're doing also this at the same time. And I'm going to kind of move a little bit to the side so you guys can kind of read this. Placemaking inspires people to collectively reimagine and reinvent public spaces as the heart of every community, strengthening the connection between people and the places they share. Placemaking refers to a collaborative process by which we can shape our public realm in order to maximize shared value. I think that's really important, okay? Maximize shared value. Okay, for everyone. It's really important, okay? More than just promoting better urban design, placemaking facilitates creative patterns of use, paying particular attention to the physical, cultural, and social identities that define a place and supports ongoing evolution. Okay? I think this is really critical, these words here. Physical, cultural, and social. We're kind of missing spiritual there, but like cultural kind of has spiritual in it, right? And in my opinion, and something you can kind of argue that physical does too and social does too. And in a way, connecting to a place, the physical space itself is spiritual too. Like literally, that's like actually one of the best ways, what's called genus loci, right? Am I saying that right? But like when we tune into a place and we connect with it, we care for it more, we clean it. We like, people are not going to dump trash and whatever if they feel connected to a place. But oftentimes we're like complaining about a place not being taken care of, but we're not allowing people to connect to it. Right. And creating those conditions for people to connect. And I think this language is really important too. Creative patterns of use. So what are examples of creative patterns of use, right? That's really interesting to contemplate. I mean, farmers markets are kind of like that, right? Like the people keep meeting every week, and there's some creativity that happens there, and there's some mobilization, but still, even farmers markets at this point are no longer local farms. It's like farms, like even when I go to the local farmers market that we have, there's farms coming out from like Central Valley, hella far away, right? Like it's not really local farms that are coming to that. So it's not really doing that placemaking anymore. But like when I was in Big Island, Hawaii, I was a part of a farming community and it was all local farmers and like local people that would come to the farmers market. And it was so awesome because like that was a place where everybody connected and you could feel the placemaking happening there. So I'm going to leave this. Wait, I can't even share this, but I think this is really important for us to think about. Is especially for some of y'all and those of you that will be listening to this later. I think it's important to think about placemaking as a way to get ahead of the disaster, especially in high-risk communities. And I think it's also really important to think about placemaking being done in a way that's regenerative itself. You know, in a way, how can the placemaking be happen in parallel to civic engagement? How can folks who are part of the placemaking that's happening on its own over here, like in some physical space, some physical gathering space, some physical locations, people's front yard, backyard, a green space in the community, a place that's being land backed in the community, whatever it is, right? That's happening there. But also, there's some people that are going to the city hall meetings or the local town hall meetings or the local county meetings. Like there has to be some parallelism that's happening there. It can't just be people just doing their own off-grid thing over here and being disconnected from local government. Because if at some point there's going to be a conflict there, right? So there has to be some bridge building. There has to be, right? And I'll explain to you why I'm saying this from a place of a context of actually experiencing this and seeing what happens when you actually create that bridge building of like having a council member come to one of these place building events and like how like literally the reflection I've gotten. I'll share a picture with you on the Big Island of Hawaii. One of the council members, she was actually the chair actually at that time. She came to one of our citizen assemblies that was at a farmer's market and we did a whole gathering and we did a laughter therapy session, and then we broke out into groups and had healthcare and farming and Hawaiian culture, and we had all these different breakout groups and we came back together. She came up to me at the end of it and she's like, I've never laughed this much with my constituents in 25 years. So I've never like had this much fun, right? And so like I think we need to also acknowledge that there's a lot of public servants that are trying to do their best, right? Maybe they're not even elected. A lot of public servants are not elected. They're working at the city or the county level or or the state level. And they really got into the job to do good. But the bureaucracy and the lack of creativity and the lack of innovation and the lack of urgency to the problem. They're so aware of the problems, but they're not moving fast enough to do something about it. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of moral injury. So how do we create that connection, that bridge for the city hall folks and the public servants to walk over and be in these placemaking experiences that are cultural, that are socially healthy and physically healthy and socially healthy and culturally healthy and spiritual too sometimes. That's cool too. I just went to a buddy who just became mayor in Culver City. He wants to do these kind of donut citizen assemblies in his town with me. And he's like, I love what you're doing. Can you bring it to Culver City? Because they have no plan in the case of a disaster. Like the fires just happen and everything. The city of Culver City has no plan. And so he's like, hey, can we do something? And we went for a walk one time, and he is a white guy, but he's Buddhist. And he was sharing with me how important it is for him that we create the conditions for all these different spiritual communities to come together in Culver City. And it's like, it's true. Like that's actually the lowest hanging fruit is if the spiritual leaders in the community come together, what happens when that'll lead everybody else in their congregation to be like, we should take this seriously. Like if this is serious to our leaders and the people we look up to, right? Our mentors, our teachers, that's important for us to do placemaking, for us to be resilient in where we live, in our local bioregion, our local community. That he creates a huge signal, right? And so I definitely think, oh, ding. Hey, D. Oh, that was an accident. All right. So before I continue, any questions or comments?
Yeah, sorry, that was me. I did have a comment, speaking to, the county stuff. I just recently learned, actually yesterday, that my county has made it, I live in an unincorporated area, surrounded by refineries. We're basically in a food desert as well. And I just learned that the county has made it illegal for any of the unincorporated areas to have a food forest on county land. So it's really, I mean, again, the rules don't make sense, and it's like the communities that need it the most. And how do we, I guess like I'm finding it challenging to like organize around like getting more people around something like as simple as that, right? Just like getting that stricken from the rules so that we could get a plot of land that's county land and start planting food for the community, which is, basic needs. So anyway, just sharing that because this is like, these are the stupid laws that exist.
I feel D, like as you share that, I think that's like really important. Like that's literally why I'm saying we have to do it. The placemaking has to happen in parallel, in conjunction, in play with the local governance, right? Because if it's not happening at the same time, like things like this will happen where you'll plant a bunch of trees and you'll do all the nature stuff and the ecological stuff and the food stuff, and then the county can come in and be like, well, got to take it all out. We're going to hire these guys and they're going to steamroll all of it. And that has happened. It's happened in Hawaii. It's happened in California. It's happened to people have come together and done some great work, and it just gets eliminated because it's not being done in coherence with the local government. Mind you, the coherence is kind of funny too to think about, right? If you start doing placemaking in a way that the community starts to get educated, right? The elders, the children, the young adults, the professionals in the community get activated and connected, then who's not to say that D, you're a nurse, that you end up becoming on the county board and you're like, no, this needs to happen and this needs, right? But right now there's not people from the community often who are nurses or farmers or ecological stewards or innovators that are working at the county, right? So there's also this huge barrier right now, there's this lack of neurodivergence that exists in the spaces that actually need it, right, to change, or the needing curiosity. I think I just said this the other day to a buddy project that we're doing in a Rodeo, and I mentioned how important and valuable stubborn curiosity is. Like the idea of stubborn curiosity, and how do we evoke that? How do we like practice stubborn curiosity? How do we remember? Like we have to be so stubborn with our curiosity that people who are not curious start to become curious, because that's kind of where we're at right now. People are not curious, even when they work in healthcare. Like they're working at the county health, or they're working at the county food department, or they're working at the state. They're not curious about what's possible. People in the planning commission are not curious about what building structures are fire resilient. Like they don't even know that you can build adobe or hempcrete or whatever that are fire resilient. That's like not even a curiosity, right? Despite that being cheaper and easier to build, right? So just there's a lot of examples like this that we're hitting a lot of lack of curiosity. But this also goes back to I'm going to talk about the Doughnut economic aspect of this, so you guys can get a understanding of like how this is a part of this thinking process and doing process is actually understanding a framework that gives us a direction, a compass, right? Because we do need a compass. Like you can't like go anywhere, you can't travel anywhere without a compass. I mean, you could, but it kind of is nice to know which way is north and south and east and all these things. It's good to know your direction so you can also come back to where you were and go a different direction, right? It's really important, a part of traveling and traveling wisely and having fun while you travel, because you can always come back, to where it came from, or to go to a new place. So we need a compass for this disaster mitigation work, this disaster resilience work, this sacred resilience work. We need a compass. And at the same time, this compass there has to be a compass that is mimetic, right? Like something that is, you guys know what mimetic means? Drop it in the chat. What does mimetic mean? Something that's mimetic, something that's a symbol, right? I mean, like even me, I'm wearing a symbol right here. The khalsa is a symbol. Oh my God. And it is like a circle too, and a donut. Oh my gosh. What? The khalsa is a donut. It's a sword donut. But like symbols move humanity. Like literally, like look throughout history, like symbols, you'll find them on coins, you'll find them on flags, you'll find them on chest plates, you'll find them on embroidery, you'll find them on carpets, you'll find them on blankets. I mean, all over the world, symbols are so important to humanity. So what if we had a symbol for economics, a symbol for disaster, a symbol for action, a symbol for understanding of like the health of our system, our health of our city, our health of our bioregion, the health of our state, the health of our community, our health of our company, right? What if there's a symbol that can help us see that and feel it and understand it? I think really more important is about integrating it so that we can do the action that does something about it, right? So this is what the Doughnut economic model is. It really is a way the intention of this and how it's being used around the world is freaking amazing. I'm super excited about this. There's actually an article being published in a business ethics book that I got to write. I got to write a chapter in, and it's going to be released in the next few months. But it's going to be going out to business schools and about how, how this type of sacred economics could actually start to shift, and it already is shifting things around the world. There's places around the world like Amsterdam that are already using this. Like the government of Amsterdam uses donut economics to communicate to the public, and the public reflects back using the donut economics model. So instead of doing surveys and polls and all this stuff, the data and the relationship with the community is through the donut economic model, right? So I'm going to share this interview by a dear sister, an economist, of the new Doughnut 3.0 that just got released. You might hear a shout out to me in there. It's kind of cool. I always love getting a shout out on a different podcast that I'm not a part of. And at the same time, it's really cool to understand like what are the implications of this? Like how is it being used? How can it be used? It's good to hear from, but it's also important to kind of dive into other aspects. 7 years ago, this was Kate Raworth, who was a leading economist out of London School of Economics, who coined the term donut economics. But really, donut economics is just a framework that allows us to see the social and ecological indicators on one map. So if I were to give you an example, like, oh, wow, and by the way, here's all the donut projects that are happening all over the world. So just to give you an idea, this is not like a tiny, teeny thing. This is a decentralized effort happening all over the world that's being led by citizens. Like actually more than government people, citizens are leading this, but government folks, there's people who are becoming government folks by working on donut economics. So I think that's also important, that people are getting educated and empowered to go into public service with this knowledge, with this innovative thinking and doing and application. I think that's really critical. This is the California donut that we created and released. This is free and open source. We actually published this intentionally open source. We want to inspire donuts all across the United States. We want to support them. We want it to be a kind of a coherence of understanding how we can leverage this for disaster mitigation and resilience. If I show you this, really what I like you guys to see, what this indicates to us, just imagine this being a blood report, or you're doing your full health report for the state of California, right? And this donut, the green part, we want a healthy system, like a healthy state or a healthy city is not going to be leaking. So all this red, those are all leakings. That's leaking. And the inside, that's all leaking. That's a jelly leaking. The jelly donut is leaking, okay? We don't want any of this leakage to happen. We actually want everything to be in there. And what is telling us that stuff? There's actually a lot of research and data behind this. I mean, we even paid indigenous communities to get their perspective and their blessing and their perspectives too, because we didn't want to just integrate. So we worked with academic institutions all throughout California. We worked with government organizations. We worked with nonprofits and community-based organizations. We worked with indigenous communities, farmers, urban communities. So a bunch of research went into creating this donut. And really this donut is a holistic map, a holistic medical report for the state of California. And the inside part is social indicators, and the outside is ecological indicators, right? These indicators basically are telling us what can what does a healthy California need? Like, in order to have a healthy and safe space, a regenerative and just place for humans in California to live and be healthy and well, what do they need? And so that's what these social indicators and ecological indicators, and I guess I'll zoom in here too, so you guys can see. So you can see the social indicators are kind of, this changes, by the way, like the language can change, because when you're talking about social indicators in a rural community, it's gonna be very different than an urban community, right? There literally people use different words. I mean, I've done this presentation in like Placer County and Stanislaus, and people say different words there than when they say it when we're in like Oakland or San Francisco. So I think that's really important. Part about this donut economic framework is it's agnostic to politics. It's agnostic to economics. Like this is like not anti-capitalist, anti-socialist, it's not anti-anything. If it's anti, it's for a social and environmental system. But it's not overtly anti. It's just showing you, look, we're not well. Like, we're not well in peace and justice. We're not well in political voice. We're not well in social cohesion. That's And there's data that backs that up. And a part of this data, the way that it is organized and facilitated, is we ask the questions, and all over the world, everybody's doing this citizen assembly work all over the world with Doughnut Economics, asking the community, what does it mean to be healthy? So what is a healthy social cohesion? So this data was actually generated from asking the question, what is healthy social cohesion? And then you find the data for that, and you find out how much we're overshooting or we're breaking out of that boundary, what percentage that we're not following through with that. Health, what does it mean to be healthy for humans in California? So we do that research to find that. And so, I mean, obviously, so here, like, I'll show you guys here. So I just mentioned health, right? So we go over here. And so the question is life expectancy. That was the question we asked, was life expectancy, percentage of population living in counties with life expectancy below OECD average, 80.3. So 49% are living in counties below. So we want that to go to 0%, right? But it's at 49%. So that's to give you an example. So we created the metrics to be like, what is the ideal, like, what are we aiming for? So I think that's really important differentiation about this work. It's not, we don't want to just keep looking at what's wrong. Like, that's not, we're already there. You can just pull up Grok now or Gemini or any sort of like AI and be like, what's wrong? Give me the data, right? We know what's wrong, right? But the questions we need to ask and the ways we need to move forward is asking, where are we trying to go? And this is what Doughnut Economics is helping us, guide us with this. It's creating this compass, right? And I invite you all to kind of tune in with this. You can check out the website, the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. It's the international organization. CalDEC is the California organization right here, CalDEC. You can see the snapshot here, and you can see kind of our work here in California. And then I'm gonna shift this. Well, first of all, before I go anywhere, does anybody have some questions about Doughnut Economics? I mean, I'm sorry I couldn't give Dahil, next time we got to send everybody donuts. Whoever registers, right?
We can try to make a budget line item for that.
Free healthy donuts or some cultural donuts. You have gulab jamuns or something, right? You know, that's a donut too.
I don't know if I'd call it healthy, but sure.
Touche. Anybody have any questions about Doughnut Economics or comments about this? Because I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but I think go ahead, Dahil.
I actually do have a question. Since this model is so, newish. It's not sort of like the newest thing on the block. It's been in conversations. Have there been have there been larger communities of folks like in cities or in unincorporated areas or places that we know of where this kind of model is being adopted at a level in mass rather than just sort of a part of like organizational or community training conversations?
Totally. There are probably the best example is Nanaimo in Canada that has completely integrated this. Unfortunately, I mean, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Our work with California is the most novel work in America. I mean, we now have like Chicago's reached out to us, and Chicago is kind of wanting to use our research and our metrics to kind of replicate. We also have now that we've finished the California donut for the past 9-10 months, San Jose they've been creating a donut. So a bunch of citizens in San Jose we gave them some funding, and they're working on that. So there's actually a San Jose donut that's being formed right now, and they've interviewed government officials, they've interviewed academia, San Jose State. So they're working and collaborating with different organizations throughout San Jose. I'll share actually a really cool a PBS show that we were a part of, that San Jose project was a part of a little bit in a moment. So California Donut is sparking, and I would say we're donut daddies and mommies for smaller donuts throughout California, right? There's a San Jose one, there's a San Francisco one that's happening. It's on this 5th month now, right? So a really great team of San Francisco people are coming, which is cool because there's so many technologists there. And they're like, oh, we can build this tool and this. So it's kind of cool to see the technologists coming to the table. And then we also have a San Diego County one that's happening. And then we have a Placer County, and San Mateo reached out to us. The county reached out to us. So that's different, right? We have citizens working on it, but now we recently had one of the counties reach out to us, and we're like, how do we integrate this into our sustainability? work and metric. So it's like, huh, like, so it can actually work that way. But in another place around the world, Dynamo, I always spelled this wrong. Uh, this is the one that is actually literally integrating it, and they've actually created an organization that is funding projects that are helping heal the donut in Ainamo. So like they've gone to like an extra level. They're like, hey, look, we not only are identified that here's the challenges for this town. It's a northern Canadian town that's impacted by a lot of environmental issues as well as social issues. So when they integrated the Doughnut Economics, they were like, wow, this thing could really help us out. So they've now turned it into an investment model. So, like I was bringing up before, how do we invest in disaster mitigation, right? They're using the Doughnut Economics to create the investment vehicle for the community for projects to get invested, for businesses, for nonprofits, for ventures that maybe some of them can even go away. I think this is one of the things that gets talked about a lot in the international organization is ideally we want to create organizations that don't need to exist forever, right? If you heal a certain part of the donut, you're done, If you cleaned up the water quality, you shouldn't have to keep being there. It's just about maintaining it or creating a system that will maintain it. So anyways, I think that's really important too, is that we don't create an industry also around, then it's just the disaster capitalism again, right? But good question, Tahil. Anybody else? You guys feel good?
Yeah, and just to let people know, if they would like to unmute to ask their question, they should be able to. So we don't want to keep people limited to the chat box.
All right. Anybody? No? Hello? Everybody's like, they're so enthralled by the conversation. So now I'm going to give you guys really quickly a kind of a breakdown of what has happened. I think it's really important to celebrate. I think, I'm always like, I'm on to the next thing, right? I'm always like, what's present and what's coming, and like, how do we build the momentum for what, because there's a lot of social molasses, right? It's really hard to get things going because there's so much pessimism and there's so much cynicism and there's so much spiritual anemia too, right? Where people are just like, everybody's kind of going into selfishness mode and self-preservation rather than collective preservation. Because the paradox of that is if you just do self-preservation, you're not going to even be able to self-preserve because humans need each other. We're actually altruistic. So just doing self-preservation is actually not even good for you and your family. It's not a longevity thing because when the disaster does happen, you actually do need the community and more community, right? So in celebrating what has happened, we started organizing. The first time we started organizing around disasters was in Big Island, Hawaii. It wasn't. This is a different thing. Let me show you the Big Island, Hawaii stuff. Where is it? Here we go. So we started organizing these. We started organizing civic actions for intentional communities. And what sparked this was I got reached out by a friend there was these off-grid intentional communities, that like they were like, forget about politics and we're going to move to Hawaii and we're not going to like deal with any of the American stuff. And we're going to deal with any of the politics and any of the government and stuff. Right. And so they had all these intentional communities all around Big Island. And then they started getting shut down by the government. Like I'm laughing because I'm not laughing and like laughing at them. I'm laughing at the situation that like people are literally like, oh, we're gonna escape from all like the social responsibilities and social integration, and then still the government came around and shut them down, right? And it's like you can't escape. Like there's no escaping. We're a part of all of it. Everybody's a part of all of it. So there's no escaping. So they started getting shut down. So I got reached out, and one of the leaders from one of the groups was like, can you help? What can we do? And she had burned out from the Bernie Sanders campaign. She'd been really big in the Bernie, and she had burned out from that. She like worked so hard in the 2016 campaign and was totally demoralized with whatever happened there. And she was just like, I don't want to deal with politics ever again. And she went to this intentional community and she's like, oh, shoot. So she reached out to me and she's like, you look like you're having fun while you're doing like civic engagement stuff. Can you like help out? And so So what I did was I organized, we talked about stuff. We're like, all right, let's look at the tools that people are using around the world, from like in Taiwan with Audrey Tang and the citizen assemblies that they organize. And this is different models that people were using all around the world that was working, and not, and also like my culture. I mean, Tahil, you're Punjabi too, in India, like where our family's from, people gather around the mother tree. Like that's the town hall. There's no like city hall. There's like a mother tree in town, and all the elders meet up there, and there's like cha, and there's like biscuits and some prontas, and then they talk about all the problems and do conflict resolution and resource mitigation and allocation and supporting whoever needs supporting, and who needs a cow. Oh my God, their cow died, and like all that gets done at the mother tree. And so we were like, how do we recreate that while with the intention of also supporting all these comedians, giving them some guidance. And then what I did was I invited one of our council members as well, and some local commissioners and some local Hawaiian elders. And so we had this gathering, and it was incredible. Like, it was on outside, it was looking over the ocean. It was like this beautiful, I mean, it was actually raining that day. And when we were like, oh darn. And we set up, we're like, let's trust it. We're going to do it. And right when we set up, the sun came out, and it was like beautiful. And so, it was like, it ended up being like 3 hours long. It was so fun. Even Ashley, who came, the council member, she was totally accessible and talking to everybody, answering questions. We broke out into different groups. And so people collaborated and around like healthcare and around farming and around like intentional communities and how they can like actually like work with the government, how they communicate to the government. So there was a lot of demystification that was happening. And actually some of the people that were in Hawaii, they had never ever voted. They had lived in Hawaii their whole life, or they had moved there when they were younger, and they hadn't voted at all. They'd never done anything local government. They now are going to local meetings. They're now locally involved. In fact, they're so locally involved that some of the resilience funds are going to these intentional communities so that they can provide resilience for the local communities. So that's kind of what's I just want to share that. The intention of this was just a kickstart. It was like I had no intention to control it or be an owner of it or anything. Literally, it was like, it was so sacred in that sense. It was like, how do we just make a sacred space for people to connect to the local government and also connect to each other in a meaningful way? And then let's see what happens. And it's happened, and it's continued to happen. It's continued to happen so much that we were invited to do another one and another part of the island. And this part was in Hamakua, which is up the coast on the Big Island. And this was the farming community. And this community was really kind of getting frustrated with kind of like how the shutdowns had happened, and the farming communities had been shut down, and they were like trying to get things started again. So once again, we invited one of the council members, Heather Kimball. She was the chair at that time, and she was also trying to get everybody to vote for a new office, an office on sustainability, climate, equity, and resilience. Okay, so she was like trying to get that office to happen, and a whole office to be formed that would focus on resilience, right, and equity. Guess what? The people who showed up to here never voted ever before, got to meet her, ask some questions. We had some processing. We did some citizen assembly. Those people went and voted for that office. Now there's officially an office on the Big Island of Hawaii called OSCAR, Office of Sustainability, Climate, Equity, and Resilience. It exists now. So they're actually working on projects and efforts to create more resilience on the island. And the office was created by the community and voted by the community. So there's public servants now focused on resilience on the island. They're local, not federal, not FEMA, not centralized organization, but a local organization. So just giving you guys an example of how these citizen assemblies can actually turn into, there's Heather right there. You can see that's her over here. She's got her, not that one right there. That's Heather right there. And you can see people are hanging out. And this was the farmers markets up, up on top. Oh, that was my mentor. He's actually a really amazing commissioner and a chair for the Hamakua Commission. And up there was the farmers market up there. And so people were just like, they would come to the farmers market. They're like, what's happening? We're like, hey, come on down. And we had free drinks and food. And we're like, here. And by the way, everything we do, just a reminder, everything we do always has free food, free healthy food and drinks, always. Huge key. That's a Lunger thing, right? That's a spiritual thing. You know that they all about. You feed people, they're way more open to collaborating, listening, cohering, solving problems with each other. It's way more potent. And then, so just going back, we started doing these in Contra Costa, organizing around disaster resilience and having gatherings where we're also helping out a local organization, involving our local organizations too to provide food and nourishment, inviting also people in the community to connect to each other. What we started noticing when we were doing these gatherings was people who had separated because of political differences over the years. They were coming together around disaster resilience. Like literally, we saw people like in front of us. They were like, "Oh, we haven't talked in 2 years," and they're like, "But you know what? I didn't know you were good at that." And yeah, I can build that, and I could do this. And it's like, what? Like people they didn't even know the skills each other had and how that would support each other. And so this created the conditions for more friendship and friendships to happen, and also separation to be dissolved between people that had been generated from political differences, right? Which is mostly projected by social media, right? That's not a healthy place for people to connect. San Diego, we organized something with indigenous folks for an indigenous, and this from Adam, my brother, who's a farmer with Red Earth Movement. He is leading disaster resilience around food security for a lot of the reservations in the San Diego area and San Diego County, and how important that is to organize, because a lot of times, a lot of these indigenous communities, people come in wanting to work with them, but they don't actually help out the infrastructure, especially the food infrastructure and the energy infrastructure and the water infrastructure. So we created this disaster resilience gathering to kind of honor that and call in community members who want to support, not just with their money or they're like, oh, talk on a panel, but like actually who has skills to offer these communities, who can build, who can do this, who can heal, who can do things that are going to help these some of the reservation and indigenous communities that really need it, right? And then we organized in Los Angeles during the LA Climate Week. We had another disaster resilience gathering down there for the Fillmore area, which is a farming community in northern Los Angeles. Then here was another gathering we did, and we once again integrated local organizations. We had free food and drinks. We helped out a local nonprofit, a local ecological nonprofit as a part of the disaster gathering and the call to action. In fact, you guys can watch the video here. I even got a link. Hold on, watch this. Look at this. Boom. So if you guys want to watch the video of this, I always got receipts, like there's plenty of receipts everywhere. Okay. And then this was the project that we did with San Jose, with the San Jose Doughnut Project. We ended up organizing a disaster resilience gathering with the San Jose team that's doing the San Jose Doughnut. And an organization came and filmed this. So a show that's an Emmy-winning show on PBS came and filmed what we did. And so this episode's awesome. This episode kind of shares, I guess my theory of change really is grounded in play. Like I think we need to like solve our problems through play. Right? We need to like access we need to access the energy of play. We need to access the energy of play to be able to come up with innovations and problem solving and collaborating with each other and making mistakes and then being okay with the mistake because we're playing. We're not, like a little bit taking away the edge, right? That allows us to be more edgy because the edge is where the innovations happen, and that's where the movement and change happens. When we need to shift is the edge. You actually literally, you turn. When you turn, you need an edge, right? And so for us to turn our society, we need to get a little edgy. But in order to get edgy, you can't take it too seriously, right? So play is really critical. This episode really highlights it well. It also talks about doughnut economics and how doughnut economics can be a model. If we practice play, it can be a model for us to move and lean into the solutions in a way that can be regenerative to us, restorative to us, can be actually accessible and hopeful and healthier for children, right? Because if we're always scared and angry and frustrated, and the kids are learning that, and teenagers are learning that, and the Gen Z are learning that, there's no longevity in that, like we don't want angry, bitter adults. All right. We don't want that. We already know what we get from that, right? So we want to make sure that we're teaching the young people, the young adults and the youth, we're teaching them the right way, the college students. We need to show them that there's a way to be hopeful, but for that to be grounded in reality and action, and for that to be playful and restorative and regenerative, and joyful. And if not overtly spiritual, there's got to be some sort of understanding of our interconnectedness, like a realization that we are interconnected. We're breathing the same air. We're sharing the same soil. Like we are literally, like the sun, we're sharing the same sun, right? Like we need to start acknowledging that we are interconnected and interdependent. And on that note, now we're doing disaster festivals. And that's kind of the culmination. These disaster gatherings have turned into disaster festivals where we're kind of calling in the CERT people and we're calling in the ham radio people and we're talking about animal care and ecological building and food resilience and caregiving. And we're just bringing it all together. We're making it hyper dynamic, but also making it so it can be adaptable. So if somebody drops out, no big deal. There's somebody else who will pick up the charge, right? Or like there's multiple things happening. So it's a festival. So it's not, people can choose their adventure, right? Like, so if people want to go, in fact, what do I actually have an example? So one of our disaster festival that happened, you could see we had one right on the watershed here where it's a high risk disaster area. We actually created a choose your own adventure situation. So some people went on this fire route and some people went on this earth route. And the earth people ended up planting trees that are fire resilience trees. And the fire people ended up having a conversation, and a constructive conversation with the fire chief. And, we talked about ecological building and hydration of the water of the area. So that a different way of mitigating fires that the fire chief didn't even know about. But by creating this option, it was amazing because it was an opportunity for the fire chief to learn too. But guess what? What allowed the fire chief to learn was there was a retired fire chief with us that went for the walk, right, with us. So he actually was way more receptive to us because there was another fire chief that was studying and researching and open and curious. So I think, once again, it's like this, how do we generate curiosity and reflect to people in a way that we're not projecting like, you need to do this, but it's like we're using community to spark curiosity, because we don't know who will inspire somebody. I might not inspire you, Tahil. I might not inspire you, but somebody else might, who might resonate with you, right? And so it's important that we do these things in community. But this was really fun because this choose your adventure created FOMO, because the people who went on this, they're like, next time we want to do this thing. And the people went there like, oh, next time I want to do this thing, right? But they all loved it. And everybody had a really good time too. So just to give you an example of how we're looking at this, what we're doing, and continue to build what we're doing in such a way that also the community finds out about it. Because we walked around town, like both of these groups walked around town. Many people joined. We were walking around, people were like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, come join us. And they like walked out of their house and they joined us, and they're like, this is awesome. Later on, people were also talking about what we were doing. They're like, what were you guys doing? And we're like, oh, we're doing disaster mitigation. And they're like, when's the next one? Can we get involved? And so I think it's also important for us to get out in the neighborhood and start to create a signal that actually we can come together and do something. And there are people coming together and doing something. Like, what did Mr. Rogers say, Tahil? Find the helpers, right? But you're not going to be able to find the helpers unless you're helping. And you're showing that you're helping in some meaningful, practical, embodied way. So I think that's really critical. And so I'm really grateful that we've been kind of like doing these playful games and gamifying what we're doing. I think it's really key. And gosh, 427, still got time. And thank you, Geneva. She looks like she's out. So I'm going to close this conversation just with this, just with the simple kind of invitation for everybody is, sacred resilience, it starts within us. Like, it always starts within us. Do we have a healthy relationship with death? Do we have a healthy relationship with the end? Like, you got to think about that. Like, real resilience comes from acknowledging that every moment, every night we die, every day we could die. Every moment there could be a catastrophe, a disaster. In every moment, there could be a meteor that hits. There could be a volcano. There could be earth. There could be infinite amount of things that happen. Our life is that fragile. First, we have to acknowledge that, that's the one thing I could guarantee all of you guys is we're going to die. Like, you, me, we're going to die. We're going to die. Okay, now when we acknowledge that we're going to die, how are we going to live? That's really important. Are we going to live fearlessly? Are we going to live with courage and compassion and curiosity? Because if every moment is a gift, and if every moment is an opportunity for us to be sacred, for us to treat every moment sacred, because we don't know when the end will come, then in that moment, in that space of courageous compassion and curiosity, what can we accomplish? And what can we accomplish when there's two of us with that same feeling of sacred resilience, and three of us, and four of us, and we're all relentlessly, stubbornly resilient, stubbornly curious, stubbornly compassionate, and stubbornly courageous?
Thank you, indeed, Rishi, for giving us, I think, a really important reminder of just kind of what it means to be impermanent, but to make use with what you've got to actually celebrate what's there. And to find ways to be able to renew it for ourselves and for generations going forward.
Mhm.
I think I think we oftentimes always see it as like a conversation about future generations is about something that we don't need to plan right now. It's something we need to build up to. And it's actually nothing further from the truth. It's actually, we should have started the work a long time ago, and these are the conditions we're in right now.
Yeah.
So, what are we doing to actually change course? And I think to really to really put a framework to that is centered around reimagining our relationship to creation, reimagining our relationship to each other, reimagining the strategies of how we're connected with each other makes such a big difference. And one thing that's really come to mind in preparation for this conversation has been some of the major natural disasters that have just happened in the last couple of weeks. The snowstorms galore throughout the Midwest and the Northeast. Looking at the major earthquake that hit off the shores of Aomori in Japan, the typhoons that hit Indonesia, taking the lives of 1,000 people. I mean, there's a lot that's happening on a constant basis in this poly crisis that you've talked about. And for the folks on the call that know that like this can seem super overwhelming, it's because it is. So let's never deny that. And we've also been given the skill set, the sense of leadership, the obligation from our traditions, and the opportunity to connect with 7 to 8 billion other people to actually change the course for how we can do this.
Yeah.
So I think you've really been able to find some key ways to talk about that, especially in a way that doesn't lead to further ecological decay. And it's really exciting to be able to see how we can, see this conversation take shape into potential opportunities for training in the future, whether virtual or in person through your leadership indeed. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you, Tayo. Thanks for giving me the opportunity and supporting, and all of you for participating and being present with this conversation. It's very hard to condense all of this into a couple of hours, an hour and a half. Actually, there's so much, and you all have so much knowledge and wisdom, and I'm just excited to kind of continue spinning this with all of you, and what we can create with this donut vortex, this toroidal field of disaster mitigation.
Yeah. Totally appreciate that. I want to give time for folks that may have any questions if they'd like to come on camera, if they'd like to unmute. We'd love to hear from you. This is a great time than others can find to be able to ask the questions, so please don't hesitate. Alrighty, awesome, Asher. Thanks so much.
Oh, he's out of here? All right, take care, Asher. Thank you. Have you seen this episode, Tahil?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, you gotta watch. It's so fun.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out for sure.
Yeah, it's good. It's PBS. Support your PBS shows.
Always support local, whatever that means. Whether it's local media, local produce, or anything in between.
All of it.
Yeah. Well, I will take the opportunity to ask maybe another question.
Yes.
Um, one thing that really does come to mind about this sort of resilience against disasters is I think oftentimes people feel like there is what people might say is like, oh, where is God in the midst of all of this? Why is
Yeah.
God making all of this happen? Which is kind of a framework around, just really thinking that when these kinds of things happen, we tend to turn to a God that we also sometimes have a difficult relationship with, for those that have a religious or spiritual belief in that way. And I guess the question that I have is either from Sikhi's perspective or from what you've learned in terms of, developing your understanding around disaster resilience, um, how how can faith and spirituality be showing up as a mobilizing agent in the times of such polycrises? Where could we be tapping in more into the ways in which we learn from our traditions and how they show up when something really terrible has happened, so
Yeah.
that people don't feel like they have to be compelled to change their religion or they need to have a crisis of faith moment in the midst of things, but that they can look and say, actually, I've been given the tools to work with others, and how do I build my faith disaster toolkit that
Yeah.
accompanies my physical one.
I like that faith disaster toolkit. That's great. Yeah, it's I feel this is like a good question of like why it's important to have for us to cultivate a spiritual community, right? Because if it comes down to a crisis moment, it's kind it's it's not it's not a smart way to play the game of life, you know? It puts you at a place where you can be taken advantage of and you're more vulnerable. And like there's a very fine line between a spiritual faith and a spiritual community. Asher and I have talked about this, so he's not here, but there's a very fine line between a spiritual community and then a cult that's harmful, right? And oftentimes the cults or the harmful cults will take advantage of people at that spiritual crisis moment,
Mm,
right? Or the disaster when they're experiencing disaster, or they're going through like a severe divorce, or they're having some traumatic event in their life. They become super more vulnerable to
right.
a predatory cult or a predatory spirituality, right? And so I think when we cultivate healthy spirituality, which in a spiritual community, I feel that's critical. And yet at the same time, to heal, we're kind of at this precipice right now. Like even our community, right? The Sikhi tradition, like I've traveled around a lot. I mean, I'm grateful for my mom, the one that my mom goes to, because it's way more alive in that way. But there's many that I travel around to where you'll see nobody that's not Indian and not Punjabi in those temples, right? But like the tradition is to feed everybody, right? And whether they're poor or Christian or Muslim or Hindu, or everybody's getting fed, right? But it's not happening, right, in some of the communities. And so why does that happen? Like, how do we cultivate these spiritual traditions in their authenticity, right? And in their integrity when it's no longer in its place of birth or place of origin, right? So we're kind of all trying to figure that out being in America. We're American, right? But we're also integrating all these different spiritualities. So I almost like it like Tahil, like how can we imagine an interspiritual, interfaith sainthood, right? Where we cultivate the cream of the crop with each other. Like, who are the commandos, the saintly commandos who can team up, the Christian ones and the Catholic ones and the Hindu ones and the Buddhist ones and the Sikh ones and the Muslim ones? Like, can we come together and orient around each other? And I didn't mention this to heal, but like, I also wonder, like, what if one of the problems with when I was researching this was there's not much funding from the government, right? Very little. They keep cutting more and more funding. However, there's a lot of money in spiritual communities. So like what if some of that money was going to a fund, a disaster mitigation fund, and that fund was being led by an interfaith council of
Yeah.
of badasses that actually are on the ground, that feed everybody, that build houses, that learn ecological and stuff, and they keep learning stuff and they're curious. So anyways, an
Yeah,
interfaith
because
disaster fund, you know?
yeah, exactly. Which I mean, for communities that already have a very circular funding model or a donut funding model,
Yeah.
it actually would serve us really well to have that kind of base of funds, put to the side in the case that things can happen.
Yeah.
Because it could be as subtle as an extra inch of rain or snow
Yeah.
that can lead to disaster. I think people tend to expect the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And, coming from a state like California, where fires can really, take a toll on the communities
Totally.
that get affected by them, it's no different from all of the other natural disasters that can, show up at a moment's notice and go from being okay to severe.
Yep.
So I think it's really important, absolutely, to invite interfaith communities to think a little more intentionally about that disaster mitigation
Yep.
as structurally a part of the work that they do,
Yeah.
that can be a lot more than the vigils and the counseling that can be provided through chaplaincy, but that can certainly serve as a complement to it.
Compliment. I think that's a great, Tahil, I think you hit it right there. Like, I think the chaplaincy programs are really important. I mean, you see chaplains in hospitals and all these different spaces, but like, that's like the passive warrior. We also need the active warrior of the different faiths, you know?
Mhm.
And so the active warrior is the one that's going to build the compost system for the community, or build the water, the alternative water system or energy system for the community. You know, like, we also need those the strong warriors too to be funded, and they might not be like chaplains, but they're still chaplains in their own right, right? Because they also teach the youth how to work. They teach the youth about right effort and right livelihood, and that's kind of also missing from a lot of our community, is how can the youth and the future generations learn meaningful things and purposeful things that are supporting the climate and supporting the community as well.
Totally. Thank you for that. Absolutely. We want to give one more opportunity to folks if they'd like to, give any comments or ask any questions. We know that, Indi Rashid presented so much important information, so it might also just be a time to be able to go into reflection, think about the plans that you want to do, see where you can find out more information. And Indi was also super kind enough to put all of the important links in the chat. So if you all haven't already, make sure that you're saving the chat so that you can access those links later. But I think with just keeping that in mind, Indirashi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your presentation and for really giving us an opportunity to equip us with the knowledge base and the thinking that can help us actually plan to prepare for what might be natural disasters. It does really take these sort of starting conversations to be able to think about how we can make our own plans, and it just really reminds us how much it takes a community to make this work possible. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Dahil. Thank you to the whole Interfaith Center team and everybody. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Rishi. That was very enlightening.
Thank you, Becca G, for coming. Thank you, Mary, and thank you to others who were able to come in. We are really looking forward to just other opportunities to engage you all in deep, fascinating programming like this. And for this being the last program of the year, we're also really excited for what 2026 may bring. We are really inviting folks to engage us, to let us know what they're looking for as programming. And we want to be sure that we are in touch with our community in Oxford, to all the folks that we get in touch with across the country, to let us know what they're looking for. And from the board, from myself, from Geneva, our executive director, we're really thankful for so much of the support that we've received in getting to put such programs together. So we're looking forward to another year of amazing programming, and we look forward to being in touch. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Indi Rishi, and have a great evening.